Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of From. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with everything in the town. I think it's interesting how much of a ripple effect and in the long run, never knowing how much of a ripple effect losing Colony House, everything that went down would, because the entirety of everything they built, whether it is the town, whether it's Colony House, all of it in general, making the best out of this terrible situation. People were bound to find, they were able to find some form of normalcy, but Colony House falling like that, it made reality to kind of smacking them in the face. Because for so long, and it kind of floats with the theme that Julie ends up bringing up this episode about how Fatma told her, you go high enough, you can turn a nightmare and make it look into it like a dream. And for so many people, they were able to kind of block out the crappy things, some aspects to the realities of what the situation is. Not necessarily that they forgot or became necessarily complacent, but you just get so wrapped up in like this being your new norm that you accept the realities of everything around you, but you kind of almost make it a forethought because you get so caught up in the dream and not forget about the nightmare, but just kind of ignore it for a period of time. And it was a rude wake-up call when Colony House got attacked, because that nightmare came in guns a-blazing and it killed 14 people. So it kind of plays into this episode where the guy Eric, without no one saw it coming, he was just joking and everything about, oh, let's get back to the tower. Next thing they know, they wake up the next morning, he killed himself. So it is this place, the toll is going to take on you. Like, it's taking its toll on everyone. And I think this leads to an interesting conversation, especially with Donna's side of the episode. Donna, she tries to keep up everything fine and dandy. And before Eric had killed himself, that dude who was running his mouth off 2 episodes ago to Ellis, that guy kind of was, running his mouth this time, being like, oh yeah, sure, this fantasy and blah, blah, blah. He was a pessimistic, believing right, we all know how this is really going to go. And Donna is a realist herself. She always knew too, but just for everyone's sake, because everyone was holding on to this dream of hope, she wanted to keep up a brave face too, because it's I owe it to these people. I think amongst them, she's the senior member. That's why she led Colony House. I'm the senior member. I know how things were before. So you guys are down. I want to give you this gave you a little more pep in your step. It gave you hope, and I don't want to take that away from you. But even she recognized, not necessarily the futility of it all, but it's just, the fact is, they were so close to making something great here that they could almost, they almost found their groove, and then just everything went super pear-shaped. And saying that if things go wrong with this tower, people's hope is going to be broken. And what are people, because people, at least Eric, she says that Eric killing himself, it sucks, but at least that kid has every right to choose how he decides he want to go out when it comes to this situation. These people, the moment this tower thing doesn't work, because she's like, I don't think it's going to work. And can you honestly say that no one really knows for sure if it's going to work. Everyone's praying and hoping, but there's a good chance it won't. And the moment that those people's dreams are broken, because that's their last bit of hope they can grasp onto, the moment that's taken from them, they'll become disheveled, and basically this place will lose its luster. It will never be the place it was becoming. The fact is that this place might end up being what it was back in earlier days, because Donna was saying that to Kenny. You don't know what it was like beforehand. I do. You weren't here back then. So it is this complicated thing of, the argument could be, if they had never tried to make this place into what it was for a while, would they be where they are right? I mean, they wouldn't have survived as long as they did if it wasn't for Boyd making this place into what it is. Or at least, everyone coming together to make it what it was. So, slash technically still currently is, but because I was about to say, if they had never made it into what it is, would they be in a situation where they'd be so tightly holding on to this one grasp of hope? I think they still would be. I'm saying I think an argument could be made. There is a bit of a catch-22 of it all. Because they built this place, and just because one thing went severely wrong, all of that comes crumbling down. But it's would it have been better not to have it all to begin with? It's no, it probably would have had an even sadder result. It's it's a wrong metaphor to make, but is it better to have loved and lost than never have loved at all? Is it better have built this place into something and had some moments of happiness and able to kind of enjoy life here, make something out of it? Or would it have been better just to keep things going the way they were prior to Boyd getting here and kind of shaping this place into what it is current day? So I think that's a very interesting point. I think that could be made. Not saying a lot of people would make that point, but it's something that was kind of going through my thought process, like as we were going through the episode. Because Donna is in that position where she is one of the leaders, and obviously one of the other main people in this town, one of the other veteran senior people in this town is Boyd, and he's going. Well, Cavardi was one of those other people too, and he's going. Boyd's not dead, but he's in the woods, and everything kind of falls on Kenny. Like, Kenny's trying his best. He's trying to fill that void. But even Donna's just kind of like, right, kid, here you are trying to talk to me about, like, how am I feeling? It's like, no, Boyd knew when, like, I get you're trying to do your thing, you've been sheriff for a little while, so you assume, but it's like, no, Boyd knew when to mind his own damn business, and you need to do the same. And so she was just infuriated, because she's like, right, what's the point of keeping this place around? And started, like, chopping at Colony House, because it's like, right, you need some good wood. Well, there's wood right here. Obviously, she was frustrated, went to go drink. And she brought up a conversation of, if this tower thing does work and we leave here, you are going to realize how much of this place you're going to miss. Because I think that ends up being a very interesting conversation, tying into what Ellis and Fatima talk about. How she says is actually more worrying if the tower works rather than if it doesn't. Because how do we go back to a normal life? Like, how can we go back to just living a normal life, having seen what we've seen here, done what we've done here to survive, you know? Because there's also kind of think of, well, there was the whole box situation. Like, you know, Frank, he's the only one that's ever died by box, but still, the innuendo there, I couldn't walk past that innuendo. I thought about it for a second, I was like, no, I'm going to acknowledge the innuendo that's there. But Frank is the only one that's ever really died like that. And some people are like, oh, did you really do that? It's like, you go into the whole conversation Cavardi said about why that was a necessary thing, that whole conversation. So it does beg the question, all that they've done to survive, they probably didn't help out people when they should have helped. Maybe it's like stuff like that, like locking people out when they were asking for help and just left them to the monsters. So how do we go back to a normal life? Like, how do we adjust to that? And that's the scariest thing of life, because even if we do go back, we won't be the same people. And actually, Ellis comes for the example of Boyd, saying that Boyd says coming back from, coming from going from Afghanistan back home, it's almost like going to a new planet, because he says you're not quite sure whether everything changed while you were away, or whether or not you're the only one that's actually changed, that things not measuring up, and just like the scales are being a little bit off on, like, you being off and everything else feeling a little off. It's almost comparable to that. And obviously, like, I thought of that. It's just interesting where everyone's minds went when it went to that. I mean, these are like only a few people we've really gotten insight into everything. And I think even Kenny couldn't really fight too much about what Donna said, because he understood what she was coming from. And the fact is, he's like, sorry, because I'm trying my best to help out and I am trying to keep positive. But Donna was like, right, I hope this all works out, but you have to be ready for the reality of, if it doesn't work out, what the fallout is going to be, what these people are going to be like once their hearts are broken again. Because there is no after this. It's like, there's no try again. Because it's like, if it fails, we'll try again. It's like, no, you don't get a try again. The moment if this fails, these people will be so broken that there won't be any trying again, because they'll like, nah, like, what's the point? And just give up and die. Like, a lot of people will just simply give up, like, once that last spark of, this is all that's got people going. And I think Jim kind of feels that too, especially because the pressure is on him, and Jade are butting heads, because Jade's all about, like, oh, we got to find Victor. Plus, they're building the tower and everything, but the batteries aren't what so a lot of the batteries are from cars that have been sitting there for a long time, and the only, like, more recent batteries are the one that was in the car that Jade was from, as well as the one from the RV that Jim and his family came in. So that's not enough, and now they have to find a different power source, which immediately my mind was like, well, you kind of have like an untapped power source of where all the lights are coming from. But then later on Jade was like, yeah, but you can't just really like plug in. But it seems like Jade got some idea. I do love that Kenny's mom yelled at him because he was just complaining. She's like, that's all you do, complain. And it's just like, he's like, we need power. And she flips on the lights, and Jim was like, see? Flips the lights off, flips it on. See? I love that whole bit. It almost like shutting him up. It's like, all you do is complain. She was just so annoyed with him. Because I love that she's like, oh, he's lazy and saying all this to Kenny. But Kenny's like, yeah, the people you butt heads with the most tend to end up being the people you like the most. So I thought that was kind of an interesting point of view. But because like I said, my mind was immediately thinking of, well, because currently Jim and his family are digging a hole in the basement to try and find where the source of the light is coming from. So I figured, but I guess like, how do you connect that to the light? It seems like Jade's got an idea, but I guess that was the reason why they didn't originally go to that as a option. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But getting back, like, Donna kind of says that this is kind of her moment to kind of like, right, I freaked out and everything, but tomorrow I'm going to put on a brave face and we're going to keep at this with the whole tower thing. Like, I'm going to let this be my one moment of freaking out. Once again, she's always had to keep it together for so many people. But I didn't talk about it as much, but I was alluding to it. I do like what she said about Colony House. It's like, right, you guys just thinking it was drinking and sex all the time. It's like, no, it was something special. And it was this special place in town. No matter what people thought about it, it was special to everyone there. That these were people from different backgrounds, different circumstances, all living under the same roof. And it was a communion. It was a community in its own right. It was something special that they could hold on to, a little bit of light in the darkness. And what happened, that was all stripped away from them. So that's why, like, losing Colony House hit the way it did. And the whole Eric thing, especially for Christy, because for Christy, coming here was kind of a rough time for her. And Eric was one of the few people that was there to kind of keep her going. So to know, like, one of the people who got you through things ended up killing himself and not coming to you for help really shook her. And she's asking Kenny, if this doesn't work out, the tower doesn't work, promise me you'll come to me. I don't want you to, like, no matter what happens, come to me, talk to me, please, because she doesn't want to take the chance Kenny might kill himself. I mean, especially after I think he's less likely to do it, but also you never know what's fully in someone's mind. Like, they might just be at such a low point that you could say, like, oh, you have what about his mom? It's like that, when you're in a very low place like that, you're not thinking clearly about, like, right, the people I still have with me. You're in this sadness, this vacuum moment, and that's all you can. Like, you're trying to swim to the surface, but you just keep getting dragged down deeper and deeper. So even if you say, like, well, he still has his mom, that might not be enough to pick him out. So I can understand Christy being like, no, tell me, we could talk it out. Like, I just don't want to take the chance you might do what Eric did and kill yourself. I'm curious, is that something they've ever really had to deal with a lot? I don't know if they've talked about that. Like, obviously we know it's like, right, I'm sure there are people who did do that. I don't think it just ever really got brought up before. I think this is the first instance. And maybe that's also why it hits Donna a little bit, because maybe in the earlier days, before Boyd and them showed up, there were people who killed themselves. It's like, yeah, that was just people's way. So that's why she has that perspective of, the kid has every right to choose how they want to go out in this particular situation. So that's a lot of fascinating stuff on that front. Well, it feels weird to say fascinating after we had such a depressing conversation and aspect to the episode, but still, I think they did a really good job of folding that in, of like, yeah, it is kind of like this realistic thing of, like, bringing into, yes, this is an extraordinary situation, but there still is that human element of it that is very grounded. I think that's kind of, that's something they've done a really well, really good job of. But continuing the conversation in town, I think it's almost interesting that I don't think they've had any interactions. I think Ellis and Jim, when they talked this episode, is like the only time they've ever talked, and it was almost poetic. Well, I mean, to be fair, because Ellis was the one who looked after Julie when she was there, and also him being, Boyd's son, it was almost. But even then, Boyd and Jim never had many interactions, because he's interacting with people. I mean, maybe a lot of it's like off screen, but truth be told, is Jim's mainly stuck to his family when it comes to like us outside of like getting people together for this, other than talking to showing up at the diner to eat. Like other than that, Jim's really kind of kept mainly to his family and stuff, which. I didn't talk about it. Speaking of his family, Tabitha's dream at the beginning, I thought those words like, oh, the stairs. I'm like, whoa, what the hell is this? Is weird. This is trippy. And the moment she starts hearing stuff, I'm like, oh boy. And the way it cuts back and forth to Tabitha outside, I was like, whoa, what are they doing? Are they doing an Abbey? Like, is that what they're suggesting? Like, or could it be almost like she had a vision of the future? Because then she sees Jim upside down, and it seemed like there was a light in his hand, and he opens his mouth, and it's the horn from the RV when it cracked. I don't know. But part of me is like, is that supposed to be symbolic of this place is going to wear Tabitha down like it did Abby? Like, I was wondering if that was supposed to be the beginning of it. Because we saw the little bit, like, of Abby being off, but we never saw, like, how this place wore her down. Like, did it whisper in her ears? Did she start having nightmares like this? We really don't know. The only person who really has insight into this, because Boyd wasn't around at the time, so the only person who could really have insight to it is Ellis. He noticed, like, the long golf, like, staring off in the distance that his mom would do, but other than that, we don't really know, so he'd be the only one that could tell, like, the telltale signs of things not being copacetic, so. Other than that, they're trying to decipher all of Vincent's messages, which Jade tried to bring that up to Jim, but Jim's like, no, we have something realistic here, and you want to like have a jaunt about something fantasy like Victor. It's like, well, he is the one who's been here the longest, and the fact is that he was like, yeah, he's the only one that survived when the entire place got massacred before, and it seems like history was bound and is kind of repeating itself because of your vehicle and Jade's vehicle showing up here at the same time is kind of a telltale foreshadowing of what's to come, so potentially. So there's something there, but I think for Jim, being the engineer that he is, trying to be the realist that he is, that he was trying to keep them coming at this from a grounded perspective, because this is something physical and visible that they can work towards and do, because this is kind of not only everyone else's only hope, it's his too, especially because holding and bearing the weight of, this was my idea, I got the entire town involved, if this falls apart, this is on me, I failed not only getting my family out of here, but everyone else too. So I can understand why you're like, right, I want to stick with what I got in front of me and not just some fantasy. But to be fair, you need Victor, just like Ethan, is important to this place. He saw that little boy, and that little boy is the key to all of this. In what shape or form, we have no idea. But by the end of the episode, the family, Julie's like, nah, it's all going to work out. I'm sure it is. No matter what setbacks you're going through, Dad, it's all going to work out in the end. And what really resonated with Julie, and I thought this was really interesting, and she brought it to her dad's attention, because Tabitha was saying, like, right, they're going through all of Victor's drawings, trying to piece everything together. He says it's like, well, not even just like a puzzle, it's more like a story they need to figure out. Well, she played a game of, what are we going to do when we get back? And Tabitha said to go to this very specific place. Julie said, I want to call my friends. Ethan says, I want us to be happy like we are here. That despite everything, despite the circumstances, this situation brought their family back together. And because Julie had asked her mom last episode, like, what about Jim and her? Like, where are things going to stand there? And she's like, I don't know. And Julie said that, yeah, like, back home, we never really talked. Here, we're actually talking for the first time, and she wants us to keep going. She wants them, that when they do eventually get home, she wants them to continue being a family. I think dealing with the Thomas thing, and it just, I think all of that, Thomas's death really, like, made it so they didn't talk anymore. It was their way of dealing and processing everything, so I just thought that was kind of an interesting thing, and they do manage to get to the bottom of the hole where the light's coming from, but we don't find out what they discover. We'll have to wait for the next episode. So that's the entire town. Now we focus on Boyd and Sarah out in the woods, and Boyd is obviously he has a lot of resentment towards Sarah because of everything that she did. It's like, cool. He's kind of ordering her around. She's like, I needed the handcuffs off because I need to use the bathroom. It's like, no, that's why I handcuffed you in the front. don't go too far. He's bossing her around, but that dynamic shifts and change the moment he hears her circumstances. Because at first, she didn't at all want to talk. Well, because he's talked about the fact is that the place where he found the talismans in 2 years, that's the furthest he's ever gone out in the woods. And even that was by accident because he got lost. So beyond that, they've never been further. At least they're not that they're aware of anyone's been further. And it's like, right, how do we know that the further we go in these woods, it won't just end up like the road and taking us right back to town? It's like, we don't know, but that's also, we'll see when we see, because at the very least, there'll at least be one thing answered of like, cool, so the woods don't take you anywhere, it just warps you back. Because I'm curious, are any of those faraway trees there? Because they don't know about those faraway trees. I mean, they probably heard Julie's story, but I don't know if they know, because they didn't really talk about it, but... Because I think those faraway trees are probably only in a very specific part of the forest, or maybe they are in that deep of the woods too. You just have to know where to look for them, because Victor might be the only one who knows where they are. But to be fair, we know he's been examining the woods, but it doesn't seem like it's always been from outside the woods. And yes, he went into the woods with Ethan, but that's probably as far as that's gone. Like, he probably never went much further than that. So, but Sarah was reluctant to talk about what the voices said to her. It's just, yeah, I want to talk about that. He was like, no, that's not how this goes. Tell me what happened. It's like, right, they said if I didn't do what they said, if I didn't kill Ethan, if I didn't do all they said, then my brother was going to die, but not only him, everyone else was too. And so I think she had talked about that previously being the reason why she did what it wanted to, the voices wanted her to. She even brought up an interesting thing where she said Nathan always had a theory about this place, that he wouldn't be too happy about what we're doing, because if we go too far beyond what this place wants us or allows us to go, if we push too far, this place might push back. And I think we see inklings of that, because before Jim and Julie went downstairs to continue helping with the hole, one of the lights in the hallway started flickering. So I think that's a place been like, I don't like you, you're getting too close, I'm gonna have to punish you. Or maybe that's in correspondence with what they're doing and what Boyd and Sarah are doing. So, but like I said, Boyd lightened up against Sarah, because it's like, right, he's like, I know firsthand what this place will do to good people, what this place makes good people do bad things. Because even Sarah's like, why didn't you ever send me to the box? And he was like, I don't know. He was hoping to find some answer. Because I think a culmination of what Father Cavardi was saying, plus now having the context of Abby's circumstances, that he wasn't that quick to go down that route, especially now hearing even more of her stories. Like, right, I can't fault you for that. So going further in the woods, they find a whole bunch of, it seems like notes in the bottle. But the moment they get close, they start having an effect on Sarah. Once again, Jade saw stuff. Ethan's been seeing stuff. Victor kind of has as well. But why is it that Sarah specifically is tuned into this place the way she is? That's still the biggest mystery and enigma. Is it because, this is kind of a conversation that's come up in recently, and spoilers, Moon Knight has been the conversation of, is it a matter of your mind was already broken, or your mind broke because of your current circumstances? That's the question. Did this police reach out to Sarah the way it did? Because it can poke holes in you, but we see that that's the monsters. The monsters can poke at your vulnerabilities. But once again, the correlation, whether or not the voices she hears are the monsters, or is it something else entirely? That's the big question. So Sarah eventually kind of has a seizure and passes out. And when she comes to, she says that the voices told her that there's something more dangerous out here than the monsters. And you're like, what does that mean? And so she says that, right, the voice just said, tell Mr. Fish and Loaves, which is the nickname, which is, his nickname we learned last episode. The only two people who know him by that name are Ellis and Abby. So then you go like, okay, so is she on some Sixth Sense type of stuff of she's talking to dead people? But then it's like, right, then does that mean some dead people wanted her to kill Ethan? Why? Are you supposed to sacrifice children? Was Vincent supposed to die back when he was a kid? Questions like that. But it's like, or is it just this place knowing so much about it knows, because once again, it's like, wait, Trudy was like, wait, how do you know my name? And the monster was like, oh, we know everything about all of you. So does this place automatically give, like, the moment you enter this place, it downloads everything into these monsters? Or is it just they are always listening? Like, we might not be active, but we're constantly listening for every little inch that you can give us in the sense of learning as much about you as possible so we can use it against you, like they did against Home Dude, which, once again, I'm blanking on Home Dude's name. I think it was Kevin. I could be mistaken. I've already forgotten. Once again, I lightened up on Home Dude last episode because of his mistake, his loneliness. I'm like, I went hard on the pain on the episode beforehand, but I went hard on you in episode 7, but I lightened up on him in episode 8. But that's my question. What was that all about? You know? What does that mean? Who knows? Then all of a sudden, the tent starts getting messed with, and I'm like, okay, are we gonna find out there's actually even bigger, scarier things in the woods? Like, oh, these monsters that they were dealing with, like they're the low level things that, like the fact they were getting tossed around. I'm like, are we gonna find out? Were you guys grabbed by like a giant or something? Like, is there something? It's not going to be the same thing, but is there equivalency to the smoke monster from Lost in that? Which would be funny, once again. Paranu's connection being, once again, I think his character's name was Michael. But also, once again, there's executive producers from Lost connected to the show. Tangents and all that aside. But the moment the shaking is done, it's like, okay, what was that? We should have never come out here. And then all of a sudden the lights start going off. I'm like, okay, my brain immediately went 2 places. Aliens or they found a way out of this place, and that's like a government helicopter, like a military helicopter. Those are my current thoughts. I was like, those flashing lights like that, that's the last thing we get in the episode. So I have no idea necessarily what that means. The next episode is the season finale. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all of this ends up taking us. What happened to Michael? What happened to Sarah? What's going on in town? Like, are they going to finish the tower? What's happening in the basement? Like, what are they going to find that's powering all this? Because something that crossed my mind, because with the whole lights that Boyd and Sarah were seeing, I was almost wondering whether or not there was going to be a little bit of a mist situation going on. Specifically, I'm talking about the movie a little bit, because I've never read the book, and the TV show, it borderlines certain elements of the movie, but it was kind of its own thing. Once again, it was also short-lived too, so I'm thinking more so if you've seen the movie, you kind of got an idea of what I'm talking about. That way I'm talking around it without spoiling it for anyone. I highly recommend you watch the movie The Mist, if you've never seen it before. I don't know how good of an adaptation that is, like, you know, because obviously and that's a tangent and all, and so I won't go down that route, but regardless, I've only seen the movie once, and it once again has been, the movie came out like 2007, so I saw it probably the same year, or at the very least maybe 2008 when it was on DVD, so tangent and all that. But I'm curious how we're going to get a little bit of a revelation and aspect of that. I mean, that's the question. Will there be like a, oh man, people got out, will they get out? Or is it going to be like a, no, we're stuck here thing? Because I didn't talk about it, but Boy did open one of the bottles that they found in the trees, and it was like 1864 or something. So we know that this place dates that far back. So I guess those are people who've been trapped here at previous points. Like, because the interesting thing too, tackling that in, Tabitha, as she was walking up the steps, there is there was numbers like scratched into some of the cement, and they were like there were a whole bunch of different dates like scattered all across. So how far back does this place go? We know at the very least, at most we know at least the Civil War, but you know, so in the 1800s. So beyond that, we don't know how far back this really goes. And so what's at the heart of this? We'll ultimately have to wait and see when the next episode, with the season finale, takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.